My name is Anastasia, and I'm glad you are here. Shara, Carol, Christine, and my beautiful Annie co-host. I shouldn't say beautiful, but maybe I should say handsome. And my therapist, coach, Zoe Parson. Zoe is not only a thriver and survival of a domestic violence, but she is a relationship coach, consultant, specialized in narcissistic recovery from domestic and narcissistic abuse. She, Zoe, has dedicated her career to help individuals recreate their lives after experiencing toxic relationships. Her expertise and compassionate approach have made her a respected voice in the field of relationship and consulting. There is so much more I could talk about Zoe. She has thousands of members on her Facebook group, Self Love After Abuse, and you can find her on social media, Self Love After Abuse. Zoe also shared her story in my expose documentary series, which is launching on August 22nd. She is there not only sharing her story, but also talking as an expert about breaking trauma bond and sharing as well the impact the abuse took on her child back in the days when she was in that relationship. Which I'm so happy she's out and she's thriving, and today she's with us from UK, where it's like what, 9 p.m.? Is it 9 p.m.?
Yes. No, 8.
Oh, okay, 8 p.m. Thank you, Zoe. I'm so glad you are here. You accepted the invitation.
I'm happy to be here. I think it's a subject that unfortunately affects many of us, but it's a subject that unfortunately we don't talk about enough.
Yes, and that's why we are gathering today. Hello, Carolyn. Thank you for joining. Could you, as we are starting, I would like to start my questions, and also there will be a space for the audience to come with us to the stage and make their questions. But first things first, so could you define some of the behaviors, examples of abuse which we tend to minimalize and culturally see it not as a red flag or abuse?
I think that's an interesting question, especially
I was working on this.
Sorry?
Yes, yeah, I was trying hard to make questions which will be really hard to answer.
Thanks. Are you going to try and get me stumped? Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of abusive behaviors in the beginning actually look healthy. You know, so they're attentive, they listen, they can seem affectionate, they seem to want to spend time with us. And obviously that's all positive signs when we're looking to date someone. But the problem is all of those behaviors, when they start getting super intense, super pressurizing, very demanding, that you feel you can't say no, then generally that is when it's kind of flipped over into something that is unhealthy, into something that is definitely veering towards abusive. So an example of this is many of my clients that I speak to, they'll say that in the beginning, the person wanted to text them and would text them in the evening and would keep them on the phone, and they'd fall asleep talking to each other, and you know, in the beginning, it's very nice because you think, wow, this person's really into me. They want to spend all their time with me. But really, what it's doing is it's highly manipulative because it's actually taking away your time. If often in these situations you'll say, oh, I can't really speak at the moment because I need to prepare dinner, or I've got some work I need to finish, and they'll just be, no, it's fine, you just keep me here on the earbuds and you get on with what you're doing. And they kind of don't respect your your time. And they think, so what they're doing here is they're eroding your time boundary. They're essentially making you prioritize them. It's very subtle because you end up becoming dependent on them, because on the evenings where you maybe are not on the phone, you kind of start to miss them. You're kind of like, oh wow, I really miss speaking to so and so, and I wonder what they're doing, and all your thoughts start to be consumed about this person who's taking all your time. And the other really manipulative thing about this type of behavior is often it eats into our sleep. You know, and whenever we're being deprived of sleep, whether it's more overtly deprived of sleep or covertly deprived of sleep by the constant needing to be kept on the phone, what we're talking about here is a very strong manipulation tactic, because when you're tired, you can't think properly, you can't process properly. Maybe things that they say that you're kind of like, that's weird, but because you're tired, you just forget about it. So definitely, I would say talking intensely or texting intensely on the phone and not giving you space to work, eat, or sleep is a massive red flag.
You spoke about the intensity and how much time they demand and attention of you, which is so new. And I wonder if you would like to speak a little about why we fall for that, why some people are more attracted to respond to those messages and at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or pick up those phone calls, when others are like, hey, this is not, my person.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we all want to be loved, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all like the attention. We all have needs and vulnerabilities. And I think, when you're starting out in a relationship and you've got someone that's really intense and is giving you lots of what you perceive as their time and attention, when really they're actually taking all your time, you can be like, especially when maybe if you've been dating previously and maybe the person is very hit and miss, maybe they like just text good morning, good evening, and that's all the conversation you kind of get out of them. But when you've got someone who's giving you this type of attention and seems to be listening and giving you space, and you feel like you're connecting on a certain level, it can be very intoxicating because often we haven't experienced it before. I know when I ended up getting into the relationship with my ex, I mean, I was married previously, but I felt ignored in that marriage. I felt unheard in that marriage. I felt as a child growing up, I wasn't really seen. I was just there to serve. So when you have someone who is kind of listening to you and responding and seems to want to spend their time with you, yeah, why would you not? And that is the subtle danger with it, you see, because on the surface, it seems like this could be a healthy behavior, but the reality of it is it's not healthy. Anything that is incredibly quick and incredibly intense generally means that the person behind those behaviors is abusive because they're trying to get you hooked really quickly before their mask comes off.
Thank you for sharing your personal story and giving an example. And I also would like to welcome Americo Ritu. I hope I pronounce it properly. Shafena. There will be space for you all to make questions to Zoe. Zoe is a relationship coach, consultant, specialized in helping survivors of domestic violence to break from trauma bond and thrive after. Could we talk about financial abuse? Are there any warning signs we can observe before we actually get financially abused in romantic?
Definitely. I think, you know, when we go on a date as women, we kind of we want obviously the man to pay for us, but we also want to be independent, and we don't want to take advantage, and we don't want to take liberties, and we don't want to be seen as a kind of gold digger, I think, sometimes. And what I've noticed is quite often when you're dating, and obviously this applies, with guys dating women as well, is like they will prime you by saying things that they won't do or they will do. So, for example, it'll be, oh, I never buy drinks on the date. I always expect the other person, I'll pay for dinner, they buy the drinks. And you think, yeah, okay, that seems reasonable. And then the next thing is oh, I don't believe in giving gifts, and I never give compliments. And you're kind of like, that's a bit weird, but all right, each to their own. And then maybe you might be on the date and they happen to have forgotten, like you've agreed that you're going to maybe pay 50-50, and they happen to have forgotten their purse or their wallet, or they're short. They're able to pay for some of it, but then they ask you to cover the rest of it. Or, there's just signs where maybe you're expecting something and you're getting something slightly different. So maybe they might be, for example, I'll pick you up on the date, and then suddenly at the last minute they can't pick you up, so they're like, oh, maybe go and get yourself an Uber, I'll give you the money for that. And then they don't give you the money for that. Mm-hmm. And then you feel uncomfortable asking for the money, so you don't. And it's all very subtle conditioning where eventually you will find that you are paying for more and more stuff. You are not like getting gifts, but you're buying them gifts. And then when you do end up, if the relationship progresses and your finances become combined, then financial abuse can manifest in so many different ways, because you can have it that you can be working and they can take all your money, or maybe they stop you from working and do it that you're unable to work, so it makes you more dependent on them. So there's lots of kind of different nuances to it. But the biggest thing really is when you're at the beginning of the relationship is consistency. If you see inconsistent behavior and words and actions not matching, and this is with everything, so they say they're getting divorced, and then the next breath they're saying they're separated, and then the next breath they're saying they're speaking to this solicitor, and then the next breath they're saying they're not speaking to the solicitor, and you've just got like a whole heap of inconsistencies. That inconsistency, whatever the topic is that you're talking about, is a massive red flag, and you need to pay attention to it, because inconsistency is, essentially them not being able to keep track of what they're saying. So they're just not saying the truth. It's dishonest behavior.
Well, thank you for giving those examples, and I'm curious if our audience wants to give any feedback or relate to anything. Now it's the time. Cherry Blossom. Is that Cherry Blossom? Hello, Cherry. Can you unmute yourself?
Hi, Anastasia, Zoe, and Annie.
Hi.
Thank you very much. My story is I was married for 22 years to a it was a sexually domestic violent marriage, and I'm a year out of the marriage. I'm safe, and my children are safe. So I was married when I was 18, and here I am, 43 years old, and I really don't know how to date. I have always, almost as if I went from my parents to my abuser. And so what I've discovered is I didn't know what the boundaries were as far as relationship wise, and I was scammed here on LinkedIn, and I wonder what advice you may have, because the scam really was someone who said they were going to help me, and I guess this was like the first relationship after the divorce, right? But it really hurt my soul, because I shared with this person what I should have been doing is healing myself, and I feel like I now have this fear of men. I really do. I taught kindergarten for 22 years. My children, my students, and my daughters mean the world to me, and it's almost easier if I were to just stay in my bubble. I almost feel like now that I'm free, and when I say free, my ex even though I worked and we had children together, he controlled everything from what I ate, how much I weighed, what I wore, what who I talked to, and how much money he would give me an allowance. And I almost wonder if there is I'm getting comprehensive mental health care because I had PTSD and a TBI, traumatic brain injury. I almost wonder if there's like a transition phase, because I can't believe I have all these freedoms. Like, for example, Zoe, I couldn't even download an app because I would have to get that password from my ex-husband. So simple things like this, I feel like I'm a child, like in a candy store. So I was wondering what advice you may have. So thank you.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you so much for sharing. It's awful.
Thank you so much for The live
that
show.
being in an abusive relationship has on us. It's like they steal our whole identity, and we just become something that is not the person who we knew ourselves to be from years ago. So, I mean, my advice to you would be, if you're looking to date, you need to, one, give yourself time to make sure that you're healed, because narcissistic men, domestic abusive men, they're predators, and they can spot a vulnerability a mile off. I mean, I think you'll find it helpful to watch Anastasia's programs that she's releasing from the first one on the 22nd of August, because that's actually, the first one's actually talking about grooming, which we often think about grooming as what paedophiles do, but grooming is a very specific set of steps that abusers use to manipulate us into a relationship with them. And the second step is all about them identifying our needs, fulfilling our needs, our vulnerabilities, and building trust and everything. So you need to give yourself time to heal so that you know your own identity. You know, the second thing I would definitely recommend doing is, when we date, we naturally benchmark. And when we benchmark, we go, this person is nothing like my ex because they don't do this, they don't do that, they don't do this. So, and then we assume that because they don't do the behaviors that we associate with our ex, that they're automatically a better person. But unfortunately, abusive behaviors can manifest differently.
Mamo, bo jestem na wywiadzie, za chwilę dzwonię, okej? Za 40 minut. Kocham cię, no papa.
Understand red flags. If you go to my website, which is www.selfloveafterabuse.com, I've got a quiz that you can download which lists a whole heap of red flags of an abusive relationship, but also green flags of a healthy relationship. Because obviously when we've been in an abusive relationship, we also need to learn what healthy looks like. So that, I would say, would be step 3, is learn what healthy relationship is, learn what healthy communication is, learn how to be respected and how that manifests in a relationship. And then the other thing is, you need to, instead of benchmarking, so this would be the 4th thing, instead of benchmarking, you need to identify what you need in a relationship. So what is essential to your core happiness, so your non-negotiables. And then you need to look at what you want in a relationship. So your wants is the flexible stuff, the stuff that you will compromise on. And I'll give you an example of this. So I'm a non-smoker. I started dating my ex. He smoked the occasional cigarette. I didn't think it was a big problem. I was like, I can deal with it. 6 years into the marriage, and I'm like, his smoking just drove me up the wall, because his smoking was actually something that went against a core value of mine. But I can't say to him, you need to stop smoking, because he was smoking beforehand. Whereas if I'd have stuck to that as my non-negotiable, I wouldn't have dated him and the relationship wouldn't have progressed. Just as a very basic example of how important it is to identify your own needs and wants. You know, I mean, if you think about it this way, when we apply for a job, we have a CV and there's a job description. The job description outlines a basic bit about the job, it outlines the core skills and then desirable skills. And really, you kind of want to think about yourself as a job vacancy. I know it sounds weird, but what if someone was looking to date you or to apply for that vacancy within your life? What is the criteria? What is the job spec that you expect them to meet before you go on a date, before you interview them, as it were? So that, I'd probably say, is a few things that you could get started with. All right, Sherry?
appreciate you.
That's all right. And obviously reach out to me on LinkedIn if you've got questions. You know, I'm always happy to speak to whoever needs help, all right?
Thank you, Zoe, for being so generous and giving all those steps. And I'm so happy to announce also there will be a replay. I'm recording this. And Cherry, if you want me to delete some part of, just message me and I would do that and keep just the Zoe steps. And the episode 1 about grooming, yes, that's where, I've been through it twice, and that's why I, just like Zoe mentioned, had no idea it can happen to adults. And I saw, going back to the audience, I saw few people joining. Jason, thank you, Jason, for joining. Janice, Frank, Platine, Mano, I hope I pronounced it very well. Ritu, I saw you had a hand up. If you would like to come over on the stage and make your question, please raise your hand. I will add you to the audience. To the stage. And before that, I would like to do one more question to Zoe about sexual abuse. Are there any warning signs? Warning signs we can look at, we can see them at when we are dating, which will kind of give us the feeling that this can be in some way sexual abusive relationship. I know you mentioned about that if the person doesn't respect your no, that has to do a lot. But is there anything else would you like to mention for us?
I mean, one thing that I think is extremely common now is obviously most of us, if we're looking to date, the first place we go is online. And, we'll be chatting with someone, and often the conversation will turn sexual very quickly. It's kind of, you have the, hey, how are you? My name's this. Where do you work? What do you do? And then it's, when was your last relationship? When was your last, time you had sex? Do you do oral? And you're like, oh my God, what have I just stepped into? And when we've been in an abusive relationship, our ability to say no or put in boundaries is extremely hard for us. So when someone comes with a question, often we've been conditioned and we feel obligated to answer it, even if it makes us feel incredibly uncomfortable. So when we are dating, you definitely want to be looking at what is and is not acceptable conversation. So if someone is sending you a picture of their body part, for example, I mean, I don't think women do it so much for guys, but I'm sure it happens. But I know when I was online dating, I mean, the amount of dick pics that I got, it was ridiculous. So you kind of have to say, okay, I'm not going to accept that as a behavior. If someone starts talking to me and we haven't even met for coffee or had a few dates and they want to know about my sexual preferences, then that's a definite block. Because you see, all of this is showing you that someone has no respect for you as a person. Because I think when we live in an online world, people can feel that they can get away with certain behavior. But I mean, if you think about old school dating, if you meet someone in the bar, there's no way you're going to get your boobs or your dick out. I mean, it's completely illegal. So why is it acceptable in an online field? And then the other thing is, again, if you meet someone in a bar for the first time and you're having a drink or whatever, and they start talking to you about sex and your sexual preferences, you'd be like, I'm sorry, what is this? I'm not talking to you. So sometimes you have to ask yourself the question, if this was in a real life real world situation and not an online situation. Is this behavior acceptable? You know, because the thing is with sexual predators is they love to erode boundaries. You know, so if you, even something as simple as they're like, do you want a drink? You're like, no, I'm fine, thanks. And they're like, no, let me get you a drink. And then they proceed to order you a drink. That there is a massive red flag, because they're not accepting your no. They're viewing themselves as superior to you, that they know best. So that pattern of behavior, although it's only a drink, when it comes to money or sex, it's that pattern, that underlying behavior is still going to continue. You know, and the other thing as well, like I think sometimes we think, oh, sexual abuse is, you know, the pressuring behavior, but sexual abuse is also withholding. You know, so if you're in a relationship and you feel that you're being punished because you haven't done something that the person you're with wants you to do, and they start withholding physical affection, then that is a form of sexual abuse. So it can manifest differently, but yeah, I think the main thing is if someone pressures you, if someone doesn't accept your no, if someone talks about sex or other subjects that you're not comfortable with, but they still insist on talking about it, then that is a massive red flag. Because you see, essentially a healthy relationship is about equality and respect. And if you respect someone, you're not going to push forward and talk about subjects or do things that you know that person doesn't like or doesn't want.
Thank you, Zoe, for bringing that up. I was so knowledgeable, and I'm happy we have a replay to re-listen to all of what you mentioned. And for anyone, you can also visit Self-Love After Abuse, and there is plenty of information there, and you can work directly with Zoe. Ritu, are you right now able to talk?
Hi, yes I am, yeah.
Awesome. What do you have in your mind?
Thank you so much, Anastasia. I think it's a wonderful thing that you're hosting this event, first and foremost. And Zoe, what you're talking makes 100% of sense to me as a survivor myself of domestic abuse. And I'm so grateful that people like you exist who understand the layers of domestic abuse and are now educating others on it.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're doing some great work out there, and all of this could be maybe put into a book and sent it out to masses, because this is very much needed. Unfortunately, even in today's world, we see domestic abuse, you know, spreading like wildfire, and there's no control over it. And you know, whatever's been said here, I've experienced most of that. Cherry's kind of narrated my story as well while she was narrating hers. And it's almost as if this code for abusers is, you know, logged in a book. And as if they're all following the same book, they've all been educated in the same college. And they're using the same techniques to control their partners. However, even though it exists so massively, so widely, young girls are not educated enough to be aware of these signs. So I'm currently, to the organisation that I started and run, Zoe, I run projects to support women around domestic abuse. And I understand as an educator that all answers can be in education alone if we want to make any change to the society.
I agree.
So my question to you, Zoe, is what do you think can be done possibly, and practically as well, realistically, what can be done to educate young girls while they're in a very impressionable stage to make them aware of perpetrators.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think, you know, there's statistics around girls at school in particular. I think it's 1 in 6 children who are at school are in an abusive relationship, and I find that a shocking statistic, you know, especially when you consider this is children from the age of 12, you know, that is covering, and you just think, wow, that the fact that you have these people who are experiencing these types of abusive relationships and there is just no support for them, you know. So, I mean, I do think that schools could be better at educating and teaching. I mean, I've got my daughter, she's 13 now, and obviously she's at the age now where she's doing all the PSHE lessons. And earlier this year, she did the one lesson on healthy relationships, they called it. And I said to her, I said, oh, how was that? What did you cover? You know, what did they talk about? And she was like, oh, it wasn't really anything much. She said she knows more about, obviously, abusive relationships from just going on my website and following me on social media than what was actually covered in the lesson. And I just think it's a real shame that, you know, the education system is failing so many children and just losing out on an opportunity. But trying to, it's such a difficult one because people don't want to talk about the subject. I mean, I've gone into schools and I've spoken about this, and there's very few schools that will have this type of conversation and seminar made available for their students. Even I've tried to go into workplaces and get things rolled out into workplaces where there's support for, you know, staff members, and people just don't want to touch it. So it's something that I find incredibly challenging and frustrating, because I agree with you, on a bigger scale, more should be done. But how can you get people to do something if they don't really want to do it?
Yeah, I mean, women who have been through domestic abuse and have taken stand eventually, like yourself, like myself, like Cherry, I suppose, their children have lived through it and they've seen the impact, but they've also seen their moms come out the other end. So they hopefully are better clued as compared to children who have not seen it.
Definitely.
But they're still in the same danger.
Definitely, because ultimately, you know, although you can understand and you can learn red flags and you can understand and you go, okay, the tactics of abuse and the tactics of manipulation and the traits of a narcissist and how an abusive relationship is about power and control. It's like, if you as an individual have low self-confidence, low self-worth, have not ever been empowered to say no, have been parentified or have been conditioned to people please, you are preconditioned to be a target for these types of people. And because of your preconditioning, some behaviors that are unacceptable, you will naturally find acceptable, you know. So it's a very, very challenging thing. And I just think education is key, you know. So with what I do on my social media platforms, I post to educate so that people can read it and be like, I didn't realize that, or yes, that's happened to me, or oh, that's a bit subtle. And the same with what Anastasia is doing with her exposing documentary. You know, it's all about raising awareness, but it's all about educating and about breaking down the behaviors so that you can see them in a more covert, subtle setting to a more overt, you know, kind of manipulation. I mean, I know when I was being growing up as a teenager, my mum used to say to me, oh, if a man ever gives you a black eye, you must leave that relationship. And I was like, yeah. And that was my education on a domestic abuse. And I was like, yeah, of course, why wouldn't you? But abuse is just so much more than just physical. And I think a lot of what you will see when you Google is based on physical abuse. But abuse doesn't start physical, it starts emotional. It starts with the manipulation, with the guilt tripping, with the fear and the obligation and everything else. And if you don't recognize those behaviors as abuse, which I didn't know, that's how I ended up in my abusive relationships, is you're just going to continue to have people going into relationships not even realizing what abuse is.
That is so true, and that's because in most cultures, many cultures, Zoe, and you'd agree with me, um, domestic abuse is accepted as cultural practices, and that's where I come from. And what happens around you, you don't see it as abuse. That's culture. That's normal practice.
Yeah.
That's okay. A husband can talk loud, talk over, shove the wife, hit her, correct her, insult her in public. That's all normal. And you know, the financial control aspect is horrendous. We are not taught to look after ourselves. We're not taught to look after our finances, and that's an actual struggle, because you may be employed and working really hard and making good money, but you may still not have any control over it.
Yeah.
And I totally feel Cherry's pain around that, because I went through massive financial abuse as well, where I was given £2 every day to buy lunch. And I was a full-time working teacher, and I was a professional, so, you know, but culturally I was very set in certain ways. That's how I was brought up. So I did not see it as abuse, I saw it as the norm.
Yeah.
And that is the actual threat that we need to deal with, we need to start not normalizing these practices around us and challenge anything that we see is not appropriate.
I agree with you.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Thank you, Anastasia.
You're welcome, Rita.
Zoe, may I reply to Rita? Okay. What I have learned with my daughters, and the reason why I left, so my daughters now are 12 and 16. They were 10 and 14 when I left. That my daughters didn't need me to save them. They needed to see me save myself. And I needed to be strong for me to teach them strength for themselves. So what I did was I enrolled them in self-defense classes. That was their way of, oh my goodness, I guess in the kindergarten teacher's terms, like get their wiggles out, you know, just feeling empowered. And as far as advocacy for children, what I believe is very important is having one, especially online predators. That's something that in the school district that I teach in the United States, that is acceptable, because there are you know, with AI and with technology post-pandemic and having classes online, that is an avenue that I found, even at the elementary level, that our administrators are willing to do. But that isn't enough. I think it's so important to tell our children what consent is. So one of the things I wanted to share, Zoe, and you hit it on point, that the withdrawal part. So it with my ex, it was, you know, he would take care of his business and then he would just leave the room, and I would be gone. Or excuse me, he would be gone this was not your traditional marital bed that we shared, and that I've learned going to therapy that it is control. Yeah, narcissism is the control, and I just thought I would share. And one other thing that I tried to do is share my story with my legislators and speak to them about the need for funding as far as grants and so forth for my state, so that there are resources out there for children and for their parents. So thank you.
Good for you.
Thank you, Chari, for sharing all of that, and I'm just want to celebrate who you are and the journey you've been through and what you are doing. Just now by sharing, I feel like that's the awareness we all need, and it is making the difference. And thank you, Nancy, Lark, in the audience for joining. We are slowly getting to the end. I said it will be 1 hour, and I want to respect Zoe time. We have 8 more minutes. If you are interested with working with Zoe, you can message her, and she's a narcissistic recovery coach and a relationship expert from UK, but she does work with clients from around the world. And I see that we have with us Americo da Costa. Americo, is there a certain... Hi, it's great to meet you. What would you like to share today with us?
I really want to, first off, thank Annie for sharing this with his audience, because I would not have been part of this conversation. So thank you for sharing. Zoe, you touched on emotional damage and emotional abuse. That was where I was kind of focused on. I was in a marriage that perhaps should have ended years before it did, but due to cultural shaming, or the idea of cultural shame, you don't do this in our culture. You don't. You kind of stick it through. I had a partner that succumbed to addiction, and that became, a whole cultural shame. Try to keep it together, try to keep it contained within your home, trying to find resolve. That really takes a toll on people, and I myself, and a lot of people that I speak to, who at the end are divorced and start fresh, they realize when it's too late that the reasons you stuck it through, sometimes it's for the children, sometimes it's just in hopes that you can turn things around. I realize, like so many realize, man, you did more wrong than right by prolonging and adding to your emotional abuse. What can you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult one, because, being in an abusive relationship is extremely complicated. Because one, how long does it take you to even identify that your relationship is abusive? I mean, I was married to my husband for 6 years, and it probably wasn't until pretty much the very end I remember doing a quiz. I think the police came actually, and they asked me these questions, and I scored something like 32 out of 35, and they were like, "Oh, you're a high risk victim of domestic abuse." And I was like, "What were you talking about?" I was really confused by it, because I just didn't see it. So I think, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is education is key. Understanding what is abuse is vital to getting ourselves out of these types of relationships. The other thing, when we're in a relationship, we're committed. Like you say, if you're married, there could be cultural reasons, there could be financial reasons, there could be religious reasons as to why you want to stay committed and faithful to your vows. You know, and that adds another layer of complexity on it. Maybe you've got children and you don't want them to be, you know, kids from a divorced family or be brought up in a single parent family, or there's lots of different reasons as to why. Also, the other thing, when we're in an abusive relationship, often the abuser will project and make us feel responsible, make us take the blame for everything that's happened, make us feel that it's our fault, and maybe if we was different or didn't say that or did something differently, it would have resulted in a different outcome. So how long do you stay trying to fix something that you think you can fix because it's your fault when really it's another person? It takes time. You know, the other thing as well, there's hope, because they're not abusive all the time. You know, when the good times are good, they're good. And you hold on to those good times because you're relieved and you think, oh, maybe they've changed. Maybe it'll be different. Maybe it was just because they were stressed. Maybe it was because of this. Maybe it was because of that. So you start having this kind of toxic hope that you think it'll be okay. You know, so the complexity of why you might stay in an abusive relationship, how long you might stay in that relationship, it's so layered. It's hard to kind of break and wade yourself through it. So, I mean, I just say to anyone really that we can have a lot of regrets when we look back, and we can beat ourselves up and be like, why did I stay so long? But you have to flip it, and you have to be just grateful that you managed to get out when you did, because there are many people that are still stuck in abusive relationships, not able to get out, you know. So it's complicated. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that was fantastic. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you, Zoe. And all the complexity is, I feel like my purpose in creating those 15 episodes was to kind of put all those layers in different, in each of the singular different episodes, which I am so happy to announce that it is coming, and the premiere is on August 22nd, and it's for free. Make sure connect with me. I would love for you to join our live streaming, which will be followed up by open panel with experts like Zoe Parson, and you will be able to make another connections with another experts. Zoe, as we are getting, that's the time. It's 60 minutes. 60 minutes. I said 60 minutes. That's the boundary.
That was the boundary. So it's been good. I've enjoyed talking about this, and obviously being able to answer some of your questions. And if anyone here who's listening wants to reach out to me, just send me a connection request, send me a message, go onto my website, follow me on Instagram. I'm always posting information, because I think, if anything, the main key from what we've listened to today, what we've been talking about today, is education and understanding the different types of abuse, the tactics, the complexities of it is vital to, one, ensuring you don't get into an abusive relationship, two, helping you get out of an abusive relationship, and three, educating our kids so that they are aware. Vital.
That was Zoe Parson. Zoe Parson from UK, the relationship coach, consultant specialized in narcissistic recovery. Thank you all for being live with us. This was Anastasia. Thank you, Cherry, Americo. and all of you who contributed in today's show. And see you 2 weeks later. There will be another live show. And for those who want to work with Zoe Parson, make sure to connect with Zoe. On Instagram, it's Self-Love After Abuse. Facebook, it's also Self-Love After Abuse. And the website, I will include the links below. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on the premiere on August 22nd. Thank you, Annie, for being co-host. I hope you are there still.
I can sit here quietly. They can't see me, right? No. Great information you shared, Zoe.
Thank you.
I don't know. This is one thing that it baffles me. We need to learn how to this sort of abuse going on, and this is rule, and just we need to learn truly to just put an end to it sooner or later, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a two-part thing. Is obviously we need to hold people accountable. So if you see behaviors in friends, family members, call it out, hold them accountable, and then obviously educate so that those who are not held accountable and are unable to get away with this type of behavior, they're not allowed to get into relationships where they are able to abuse people,
That makes perfect sense. But you and Anastasia, at least you're doing your bit, right?
You're trying.
Educate and this bring the issue to people's minds. So well done, you.
Thank you.
Okie dokie, it's time for goodbyes.
All right, goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you would like to comment below, make sure to hashtag me, that girl who made the documentary. And also, I would love to invite you for the upcoming premiere of Expose documentary on the August 22nd, and you have a free seat. Yes, I'm releasing this documentary premiere for free, and for that to happen, go to the description and there is a link for you. Fill it up and I will see you on the other side.